Hello and welcome to the Inside Scoop. I'm Pat Riley. Thank you for joining us. We'd like to welcome our guest. We have with us today Dr. David Steinhof, who is one of the candidates for Congress. Thank you very much for joining us here.
Oh, thank you for having us.
We've got, obviously, Congressman Barney Frank was congressman for the area, which includes our community here of Raynham, for many years.
It's 16 terms. Can you believe it?
Goodness. And now it's an open seat. And there are a number of people on the Republican side for the September primary.
Three candidates in the Republican primary, myself included. And we have a primary coming up on September 6th, Thursday, which is a little unusual, but it's a Thursday afternoon, Thursday, September 6th for voting.
So tell us about yourself. Who is Dr. David Steinhof?
Well, I am the only candidate in this entire race. That includes the Democrats and the Independents that's lived in this district all of my life. I'll take that back. Independent Dave Roser, I believe, has lived in this district most of his life, if not all. But I've lived in Fall River. I'm married to my wife, Susan, who grew up here in Raynham. Actually, her family owns a horse farm right on Locust Street, a Lonesome Dove. They've raised horses for years. They've even taken care of rescue horses. I own a dental practice in the north end of Fall River, right across from the Riverview Marketplace. I've been practicing dentistry for 22 years. I've been a Republican most of my career. Grew up a Democrat, like many of the people in Massachusetts. My parents were Democrats. My mom still is, very conservative Democrats. And after opening up my own practice, after running it for a while, I decided it was time to become a Republican. I've been one ever since. Having grown up with the people in Fall River, having lived in this district, I've seen what's going on with this district, and that's what's led to my wanting to run for office. I'm not a politician. I'm telling people where I'm actually a citizen candidate.
Dr. Steinhof, have you ever gotten involved in politics before, other than just as a, voting
Very
member?
small involvement. I helped with a campaign, about 5 to 8 years ago for a friend of mine in Fall River, and that was the limit of my involvement. Other than voting, which I do every chance I can, but not politics for myself.
Now, what prompted you to actually take that step of, getting involved this time?
Well, several things. I've been working on patients for years who have, and I have the whole gambit, from the people who are wealthy to the people who are not so wealthy, young, old, various backgrounds, ethnic origins, religions, and I've seen them do very well over the years. And now, in the past few years, I've been watching some of these patients of mine come in, losing their homes, losing their jobs, losing their insurance, and not having anywhere to turn. So I've decided, after seeing it enough, and I think we've all grown a little fed up with what's been going on for the past few years with our current president and the administration's attempt to drive the economy by spending money we just don't have, that it's time we put citizen legislators in Washington, D.C. We've seen politicians do what they've done to our country for years. I'm hoping that now citizen legislators will start to rise to the top and take Washington, because our founding fathers intended for politicians, all citizen legislators, to go down to Washington, D.C., do their job, and then go back to their farm, their home, their business, whatever they did. And that's what I intend to do. I've spoken about term limits many times. If elected, be honored to serve, and would serve 4 terms, and then go right back to my dental office.
Very good. When did you make the decision?
Well, we made it shortly before we came out. We had a meeting, I believe it was on March 1st or 2nd, but the real kickoff was at my office. When I say kickoff, I mean the meeting to really decide to go forward was on March 7th in my office, where I sat down with patients, friends, some people that knew a little bit about politics, very little. We don't have any pros, that's for sure. And we are a strictly volunteer campaign. The people that are helping us are the salt of the earth, but they're from various areas throughout this district. I don't know if the viewers will know, but the district has changed considerably.
Sure has.
Right? I mean, they cut Fall River in half. They cut Raynham in half. The district goes all the way from Fall River, and you can kind of follow 195. It's kind of a fair assumption. All the way up to Brookline and Hopkinton, as far west as the Attleboroughs, and as far east as Sharon and Raynham and Lakeville. So it's a big district. It's changed a great deal, and it's become considerably more conservative.
It's an extremely diverse district, so that must be a huge challenge to try to get the word out about your candidacy.
That's right. Having grown up in Fall River, I've seen the economy that Fall River has. We're a blue-collar working town. We had plenty of jobs. We've lost so many jobs in Fall River. I think the unemployment rate is at 11 or 12%. As reported, it could be much higher than that. You see factories like Genzyme closed up, and these are practically brand new facilities that at one time housed thousands, and now there's no work in those. But you'll see elements of that throughout the district, and yet the demographics, as you said, change considerably going further north. See, people ask me, so you understand maybe what's going on in Fall River and maybe Attleboro and Taunton, but how does that affect what you look at going north? And the thing is, if there are towns like Milford that are doing well, Raynham is doing reasonably well. They've been conservative and run their finances properly. We don't want to see these other towns in the district that are doing well befall the same problems. I want to see all the towns get back into being fiscally solvent. And if we can look at some of the towns further north that have done a good job of that, that's what we want to emulate in all the towns throughout this district.
Now, when you made the decision, take us through the process of how you've been running your campaign, what your strategy's been.
All right. We started off, because we are a grassroots campaign, and by the way, I want to make mention, we just received the Tea Party endorsement.
Really?
On our way into the Stonehill debate, my wife received the email notifying us that the Mass Tea Party endorsed David Steinhof. We've been reaching out to friends of ours. Because Susan and I have grown up in this district, regardless of which town we're in, it seems we are always bumping into somebody we went to high school with, college with, grade school. We keep bumping into friends. But we've had a lot of people I'd never had the opportunity to meet before jump onto our campaign and help get our name out. We've not been soliciting a lot of money. As a matter of fact, I didn't even ask for donations and wouldn't take them up until May 1st, when I was absolutely certain we had more than enough signatures to get on the ballot. And we did. We had plenty of signatures.
How many did you need?
Well, you need 2,000 certified. We collected 5,000, and we had 2,700 certified, and that was without contesting any of them. So that was excellent. And to think we did it in just over 6 weeks. So after that point, we were full speed ahead. We've been putting up signs, getting on various cable shows, radio spots, meeting with people in various committees, groups. Last night we went to a Milford Chamber of Commerce Hawaiian party. Although we still dressed in this. I didn't think I could explain the Hawaiian shirt. And farmers markets. Our strategy is to go out and meet people face to face, hand to hand, shake hands, wear down shoe leather, and we're asking for donations in the form of small donations from a lot of people rather than big donations from special interest groups. We're not approaching them. We're not looking for that kind of money. And the response we're getting is fantastic. We're getting callbacks from business owners who have been running their business, their second and third generation family-owned businesses, telling us, we're behind you, we're strapped, we're flat out right now, but we understand you offer small businesses and you're going to help turn this economy around. And that's what we want. They're the kind of people that keep signing on, taking signs. We were out there on our way down to this show. We came from Channel 10. We stopped off at a couple of small businesses in Seekonk. I was jumping up on little sheds, stapling signs up on the road. So it's been fantastic.
Now, you've had a couple debates with the other Republican candidates.
Yes, ma'am.
How do you distinguish yourself from them? Why do you think that people should consider your
Well, I can't drive this fact home enough. I have grown up in this district, and so has Susan. And I think that does matter to a great many people, knowing that we've lived here. Heck, I mean, one of my first jobs was working in Anderson Little loading trucks, third shift at 16 years old. I understand what the people in Fall River are dealing with, but that's the people in Taunton, Attleboro, and various other towns. Raynham, we've all had that, our factories, and we've lost our factories. On top of that, I've been in the private sector all of my career, having run a dental practice for over 20 years. They do try to set it up as though Dr. Childs is more moderate, admittedly so, and she being from Brookline. And then Sean Belot is somewhat more conservative. He did run before against Bonnie Frank, but he's lived in this district for about 5 years. He lived here for a while, moved back out to Pennsylvania, and then came back into this district. I've been here for a great deal longer. I've been a Republican longer than both of them put together, and I've been voting Republican and conservative. But the thing is, now, obviously as a Republican, you don't run in Massachusetts unless you expect to get Democrats and unenrolls to take up your cause.
Although then you see Senator Scott Brown in his last outing of his first try did extremely well.
He did, but that's because the Democrats and unenrolls realize that there is a need to be more conservative. That Massachusetts used to be a very conservative state, even though they were mostly Democrats, like the blue dog Democrats they have down south right now. Some of them more conservative than the Republicans we see in Massachusetts. But I don't know when exactly it flipped, maybe in the 70s, the 80s, and it just became progressively more liberal. But I think a lot more people are taking up the idea that it's time to be more fiscally conservative, and that's who David Steinhof is.
If you are able to secure the nomination for the Republican Party, then you would face off against a candidate who has quite a war chest. How would you deal with that?
Well, his war chest, it came up immediately. He seems to be a nice young man, Joe Kennedy, and that's who you're referring to. But he's only worked for a couple of years for the DA's office, I think up in Middlesex County. He didn't even live in this district. He moved into Brookline, into one of his relatives' apartments, a month before he pulled papers. And then he received large sums of money instantly. Now, like I described before, the people who are making donations to our campaign are the people who are strapped. I had one woman call my office, a patient, who said she's owed our office money for over a year. She can't pay it because she does not have a job, but she wants a sign and wants to help our campaign. Those are the people I'm running for. He received instant high donations, people maxing out their accounts from people obviously much better off than the people who are suffering right now. Now, I described that the other night in one of the debates. That to me smacks of elitism. The people who are donating a lot of money to his campaign without ever really vetting this candidate. What do they know about him? What qualifies him to do this job? Has he worked? Has he opened a business? Has he worked in this district for a long time? But they're going to donate large sums of money. Why? Because he's a Kennedy? That's not good enough. Is it because they want to have that contact, the ability to make that phone call, to be part of that inner circle? That's not good enough either. People vote, dollars don't. So as far as I'm concerned, even if we don't amass that war chest, we've been seeing it all over this country. People winning races with 1/10 the money of their opponent because they represent the people and not the money.
If you are then successful and you head to Congress,
Yes,
what
ma'am.
positions would you take, and what would you do to try to get, Congress has certainly got a very low approval rating at this point, and our country certainly has incredible challenges. What are some of the things you would do? What positions would you take?
Congress's low approval rating right now is because Congress is standing guard on our economy. Our president has been spending, if you look at the facts, before President Obama, the annual deficit used to run in the region of 3 to 4, maybe 500 billion. We have just sustained 3 years in succession of over 1 trillion, on average $1.3 trillion deficits each year, which is why we now have a $16 trillion national debt. So 40 cents out of every dollar we spend is borrowed. Overseas, China holds approximately $5 trillion worth of our debt. This is unthinkable. Congress is standing there, even though they're being vilified, demagogued right now by the current administration, because they're standing guard trying to prevent additional spending. We cannot spend our way out of this economy. We can't tax our way out. We've been taxed way too much now. We're going to have to bring back jobs. We're going to have to bring back jobs in the small business industry. Small businesses they still employ 60% of America, and they have dug us out of recessions before. So we get small businesses going, give them the freedom to expand, to grow, and they will start the comeback, and manufacturing will follow.
And how do you do that?
By decreasing regulations, not making regulations disappear. We've got to protect our environment. We've got to make sure this environment is there for our children. But we can decrease the regulations and make them more functional. Make our regulatory agencies, such as the EPA, OSHA, part of our recovery, instead of this adversarial relationship that's going on now. I'll give you a good example. A factory in Bellingham, one of the towns in our district, burned down a couple years back. The very first thing that happened the next morning, the EPA showed up at that owner's door and said, here's a document we want you to sign, so you take responsibility for the waterways all around this factory, any pollutants, any damage to the environment. And he said, I'd like to think about it. They said, fine, you can think about it, but every day you take to think about it, you're going to be paying a $10,000 fine. Now, there is no regulation describing the amount of damages they can assess. You can't let a regulatory agency go out and do that. A company in Mansfield that we walked through, it's a manufacturing facility that does an excellent job. They employ, I want to say 40 people. They were hit by a surprise EPA on-site inspection, and he walked around for 2 hours without finding an infraction, and then finally turned around, found something, turned around and said, I gotcha, like he was playing a game. Hit them with a fine. They spent 6 months getting that turned down because there was nothing wrong to begin with. So instead of having some arbitration board or somebody they could have gone to instantly, low cost, and taken care of that immediately, they had to spend money on legal fees and wait 6 months to get that infraction lifted. So that's an adversarial relationship that's done our workforce no good. We're laying off people by the thousands. And what people have to remember is people are retiring by the thousands. You can't add those two together and expect our economy to grow. I don't know if you know that our national debt has just surpassed our GDP. Okay?
It's very bad news.
Right, our gross domestic product, which tells you right there and then we don't have enough manufacturing. We're not producing enough to sustain our economy. So we can't sustain the spending we're at.
As a medical doctor yourself, what's your position as far as Obamacare?
Good choice of words. It's got to be repealed.
Affordable health, whatever we want to call it.
It has to be repealed. There are segments of the health care plan that I think even the most ardent Republicans or conservatives would say, let's work on those. Protecting disabled, protecting those with pre-existing conditions. But a national health care plan that will, again, drive the cost up for health care across this country. It will decrease the level of service provided. It's going to drive away some of our best and brightest. People will be choosing other careers instead of going into healthcare because the fees will be compressed, the amount of money available will be compressed. I mean, this is socialized medicine. And if it isn't entirely right this minute, it's on the model and on its way. It's modeled after all the socialized medicine programs we've seen throughout Europe, even in Canada, that have bankrupted those countries. Why would we want to take that example? Private industry has always secured a better product at a lower cost when it's allowed to do so. Competition makes for better products and lower costs.
What about energy policies?
Energy policy, we've seen this administration vilify fossil fuel, coal. We have more resources than we could possibly imagine with natural gas, coal, oil. We have to open up some of the permits and allow oil drilling. We have to find ways like the Keystone Pipeline to get this oil to our country, to our refineries, so we can start to produce it and become totally energy independent, or at least predominantly energy independent. And there are renewable sources. I keep talking about biodiesel, and people are surprised that a Republican would talk about that. Like I said before, I want a clean environment as much as anyone else. Biodiesel is renewable, and if you look at what the biodiesel industry has done, very small, but it has shown where it takes an extremely safe product that is cleaner and better for our engines without any fancy technology, and has grown and grown. All that we ask is that the government reduce the taxes that are applied to a gallon of fuel. The same taxes they would apply to fossil fuel, which makes sense to deal with some of the carbon emissions and the cleanup of fossil fuel, does not need to be applied to a fuel like biodiesel. It's completely absorbable into the ground, safe, burns much cleaner. So lower that cost and make it competitive. Now we'll have something we can grow here in this country. We have enough arable land to start growing biodiesel to fill the needs of many home heating machines or heaters and vehicles.
Now, what about military spending? That's another issue that many people are concerned about.
I hope I'm not. I'm talking so much, Pat. You just keep asking me those questions.
Okay.
But military spending, Obama is proposing to cut the military by as much as $250 billion on the discretionary side over the next 5 years. What Leon Panetta pointed out is that that in turn is going to reduce our standing army to the lowest level, lowest size it's been since 1940, our naval fleet to the smallest it's been since 1915, and our tactical fighters the lowest it has ever been. When you think about all those cuts happening at once, I mean, I believe in cutting the fat, not the muscle. Cut the waste. And Leon Panetta pointed out that of that $250 billion that will be cut over the 5 years, which you think about the spending we have right now, $250 billion does not sound like a lot. But by cutting it, only 60,000 was ID'd as being cuts you could associate with waste or overspending. The rest of it is going to come right out of the budget, meaning we're decreasing personnel and weapons. So we're reducing the efficacy of our army, of our fighting force. And I think in these times, I've got children growing up. I want this country to be as safe and powerful as it ever has been. I don't think the people around us, with terrorists as active as they've been, are taking a better look at the United States. I don't think they're thinking of us any less hostily, okay? Any less hostility, excuse me.
We talked about a couple of big issues: healthcare, obviously, energy issues, military spending. What about education?
Just to make it clear, I don't believe, I want the military to not be cut so that I can end that. As far as education, I've talked about decreased federal spending, decrease the size of federal programs like the Department of Education. One interview they said, David Steinhof said to cut them right out. Said I'd like to reduce them. We can't make abrupt steps, but reduce them as much as possible. By reducing spending or the money at the federal end, you reduce the number of employees at the federal, you reduce the number of entitlements at the federal, and you put it back where it belongs at the state and local level. Reductions in federal spending means you have more money for teachers right here, for police officers right here, firefighters right here. This year when our house got broken into in Fall River, when I called up at 12 o'clock at night, it was a police officer from Fall River that responded to our house, not an agent from the DEA, or excuse me, from the Department of Energy, okay? And I want local spending. That's where people make the best use and find ways to save money, but make the best use of the money.
And most communities balance their budgets too, with a few exceptions.
There are a few exceptions, obviously. We have some great communities in this district that have balanced their budgets. I want the rest of the communities in this district to be able to do that. I want grants that, if federal grants are going to come to this district, it should be coming in the way of infrastructure that leads to private investment. Like I talked about trying to utilize Fall River's ports, the second deepest deepwater port in the state. We have a hub of transportation in Fall River. We have the 195, 24, that rail line that needs to get down there. We hear over and over again about the South Coast Rail. If we look at the communities that rail will pass through, make sure that it is environmentally, it is not going to damage the environment. It's going to work with those communities, get the rail all the way down, but do it when we need to have that transportation. And that would come, in my opinion, in conjunction with that commercial port. I've talked about mid-sized container ships, in other words, coming into Fall River's port, helping to relieve the transportation from the ports in New York and New Jersey, bringing those mid-sized containers in, and then transporting them from there all over New England. much the same way New Bedford built up their commercial airport.
Since you have a large area, a very diverse area, if you are successful and elected, how would you keep in contact with the people in such a large area? What would be your plan?
How would I keep in contact?
So that it isn't a situation you're elected to Congress and then...
Well, I believe each congressman
don't see
and
you.
woman, they end up having offices. One of the key components of my candidacy has been constituent services. As a dentist, I keep a cell phone attached to my hip all the time, and I answer that phone at the oddest hours. I respond to patients on the weekends. I've left Christmas parties in the middle of the night to go take care of patients. And that's the way I feel a congressperson, a representative, should be. So I want to be a part of this community and be listening. That's one thing people did say about Barney Frank. Disagree with his politics, but that his office, that he responded well to the constituents. And that's something I'd like to emulate.
So constituent services would be high on your list.
Absolutely.
Okay. We are, believe it or not, quickly running out of time here, but I understand that if people want more information about you, there is a website that they can...
Steinhof for Congress, Steinhof for Congress.com. I ask people to visit it, ask questions, because that's how they'll learn.
Do you have any other debates that are set up between now and the primary election?
There are no other debates, but I believe there is going to be a candidates' night at the Tea Party in Mansfield coming up. There will probably be 1 or 2 more invitations to such nights thrown at us in various parts of the district, and hopefully we'll have them on our website as soon as we find out, so people can follow.
So you will be on the Republican ballot along with a couple of other names.
Yes, ma'am.
And that's in September.
Whomever they are. That's
exactly.
right. Yeah.
So people who are registered Republicans or unenrolled can take a ballot.
That's a good point. I want to remind them, if they want to vote Republican, they have to pull a Republican ballot as an independent or unenrolled. The Republican primary is September 6th. So I'd like to make sure that people get out and vote. It's important that people get out to vote, regardless of who they're backing. Take an interest, get out, and be a part of this. I mean, there are countries in this world that haven't got the right to vote. Our founding fathers fought and died to give us that right.
Absolutely. Well, we want to thank you very much for coming. And if people, as we said, want more information, they can check out your website. And will we be seeing you in these parts again?
Absolutely. Okay. I'm going to be your congressman.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you very much for being with us.
Have a good day.
Dr. David Steinhof, our guest today here on The Inside Scoop. We want to thank him for coming and thank all of you for being with us as well. We'll see you here on our next episode of The Inside Scoop. Very good.
That was very nice. Thank you.
You're very welcome.